The first contact happened on a Tuesday morning when the massive ship appeared over New York City. Thomas Reed was having his morning coffee when his phone started buzzing with emergency calls from the United Nations. The ship was 3 miles long and shaped like a crystal, reflecting the sunlight in ways that made people stop and stare from the streets below. Ambassador Reed had been Earth's chief diplomat for 12 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Within hours, similar ships appeared over major cities across the planet. The aliens made no hostile moves, instead broadcasting a simple message in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, and dozens of other languages. Greetings, children of Earth. We are the Galactic Council, and we come in peace. We have watched your species with great interest and wish to extend an invitation to join our Confederation of Worlds. Please select representatives to meet with us. The world held its breath. Some people ran to their homes and locked their doors. Others gathered in the streets, pointing at the sky and taking pictures. Thomas Reed found himself selected as Earth's primary representative. Along with scientists, military leaders, and diplomats from every major nation, the meeting took place aboard the ship over New York. Thomas had expected cold metal corridors and strange alien architecture, but instead found himself in a space that felt warm and welcoming. The walls showed images of beautiful worlds with crystal cities and peaceful alien beings working together. The air smelled like spring flowers. The Galactic Council consisted of 7 different alien species, each more impressive than the last. The Vorthak were tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. Their leader, who called himself Elder Tam, spoke with a voice that was both gentle and commanding. Thomas Reed of Earth, Elder Tam said, your species has reached a level of development that qualifies you for membership in our Confederation. We have been monitoring your radio signals, your art, your literature, and your capacity for both creation and destruction. We believe humanity has great potential. Thomas felt overwhelmed. What would membership mean for us? Peace, Elder Tam replied. An end to war, poverty, and disease. We have technologies that could solve your environmental problems and extend human life far beyond its current limits. But most importantly, we offer something special for your young ones. The other council members stepped forward. There was Vel, a being that looked like living crystal who controlled vast libraries of knowledge. There was Commander Nix, a warrior species that had learned to embrace peace after centuries of conflict. Each had something different to offer. Humanity. We have a special program, Elder Tam continued, called the Nursery Initiative. Your children, the brightest and most adaptable of your species, would be invited to join young beings from across the galaxy. They would live and learn on worlds specifically designed for their growth and development. Thomas felt his heart skip. You want to take our children? Not take, Vel interjected, her crystal form shifting colors as she spoke. Invite, nurture, develop. Human children would receive education and training. That would make them capable of things you cannot imagine. They would return to Earth as ambassadors, scientists, and leaders who could guide humanity into a golden age. The presentation continued for hours. The aliens showed Thomas images of the nursery worlds, beautiful planets with perfect climates, incredible schools, and young beings from dozens of species learning together. They explained how human children would develop abilities that were dormant in their genetics, how they would form bonds with alien youth that would last lifetimes, and how they would become the bridge between Earth and the greater galactic community. The program lasts 5 years, Commander Nix explained. During this time, the children maintain contact with their families through quantum communication systems. They visit Earth regularly and share their experiences. When they return permanently, they bring with them knowledge and capabilities that will transform your world. Thomas asked the questions that any parent would ask. How would the children be cared for? What about their emotional needs? Would they remain human? They remain completely human, Elder Tam assured him. We enhance what is already there. Human creativity, adaptability, and emotional intelligence are rare gifts in the galaxy. We simply provide the environment for these gifts to flourish. The Aliens gave Thomas detailed files on the nursery worlds. He saw images of human-like children from other species playing together, learning advanced sciences and developing incredible abilities. The facilities looked like the best schools on Earth, but with technology that seemed like magic over the following weeks. Thomas worked with world leaders to present the opportunity to humanity. The response was mixed. Some people were terrified of giving their children to aliens. Others saw it as the greatest opportunity in human history. Religious leaders debated whether this was divine intervention or a test of faith. But when the aliens opened applications for the first group of children, the response was overwhelming. Families from every nation applied, hoping their children would be selected for this incredible opportunity. The aliens asked for children between the ages of 5 and 15. With emphasis on intelligence, adaptability, and emotional stability, the selection process took months. The aliens used advanced scanning technology to evaluate each child's potential. They claimed to be looking for children who could handle the challenges of living in an alien environment. While maintaining their human identity, Marcus Wright was among the first children selected. The 10-year-old from Denver had scored exceptionally high on intelligence tests and showed remarkable problem-solving abilities. His parents, David and Mary Wright, were proud but nervous about sending their son so far from home. "He'll be safe," Elder Tam assured them during the family meeting. Marcus will be placed with other human children in a facility designed specifically for your species' needs. He'll have human teachers working alongside alien educators, and he'll be able to contact you weekly through our communication systems. The farewell ceremony was held at the United Nations building. 2,000 children from around the world gathered with their families. The aliens had provided each family with a communication device that would allow them to stay in touch with their children throughout the program. Thomas Reed gave the farewell speech, his voice shaking with emotion. These children are not just representatives of their families, but of all humanity. They carry our hopes, our dreams, and our future with them. In 5 years, they will return to us as the leaders who will guide our species into a new age of peace and prosperity. The children boarded the transport ships with excitement and nervousness. Parents cried and waved as the ships lifted off, carrying their most precious treasures toward the stars. The aliens had promised regular updates and visits, and Earth's leaders believed they were giving their children the greatest gift possible. Thomas Reed watched the ships disappear into the sky, feeling a mixture of hope and unease that he couldn't quite explain. The future of humanity was now in the hands of these children, and he prayed that the Galactic Council would keep their promises. 6 months after the children left Earth, Admiral Lisa Parker was staring at her computer screen with growing dread. The weekly communication reports from the nursery worlds had been getting shorter and less detailed. Her daughter Emma, who had been selected for the program, had stopped responding to personal messages 3 weeks ago. Lisa had been chosen to head Earth's new space defense initiative after the first contact. Her military background and strategic thinking made her the perfect candidate to oversee humanity's interaction with the galactic community. But nothing had prepared her for the growing silence from the stars. The communication devices the aliens had provided were sophisticated quantum transmitters that could send messages across vast distances instantly. For the first few months, families received regular updates from their children. The messages were filled with excitement about new friends, incredible technologies, and amazing learning experiences. But then the messages started changing. David Wright, Marcus's father, was the first to notice. His son's messages had become shorter and more formal. Instead of the excited chatter about alien foods and strange new games, Marcus began sending brief reports about his studies and physical training. The warmth and personality seemed to drain from his words. "Something's wrong," David told Lisa during one of their weekly meetings. "This isn't my son's voice anymore. It's like he's reading from a script." Lisa had been thinking the same thing about Emma's messages. Her daughter had always been talkative and curious, but her recent communications were cold and distant. When Lisa tried to ask specific questions about her daily life, Emma would respond with vague answers that didn't really answer anything. The breaking point came when Thomas Reed received a formal communication from the Galactic Council. The message was brief and bureaucratic, explaining that the children were entering a critical adaptation phase, and that communication would be suspended temporarily to avoid interference with their development. "This is unacceptable," Lisa told Thomas during their emergency meeting. They promised regular contact. "We have parents who haven't heard from their children in weeks." Thomas looked older than his years. The stress of managing Earth's relationship with the galactic community was taking its toll. "The Council says this is normal. They claim that too much contact with Earth is preventing the children from fully integrating into the galactic community." "That's not what they told us initially," Lisa replied. "They said the children would maintain their human identity and stay connected to their families. Now they're cutting off all contact." Lisa decided to take matters into her own hands. Using Earth's limited space technology, she launched a series of reconnaissance missions to track down the children's locations. The aliens had provided general information about the nursery worlds, but had been vague about specific locations and facilities. What her teams discovered was disturbing. The nursery worlds were not the peaceful educational facilities shown in the original presentations. Instead, they were harsh, militaristic environments, designed to push the children to their physical and mental limits. The first facility her team located was on a planet called Keth 7, a mining world with extreme weather conditions and dangerous wildlife. Through careful observation, they discovered that the children were not living in comfortable dormitories but in basic barracks. They spent their days in intensive physical training, combat simulations, and survival exercises. Captain Ross, who led the reconnaissance team, reported back to Lisa with footage that made her blood run cold. The children were being subjected to scenarios that would break adult soldiers. They were fighting against robotic opponents, navigating deadly obstacle courses, and enduring tests that seemed designed to eliminate the weak. "They're not educating these kids," Ross told Lisa. "They're conditioning them for war." Lisa's investigation uncovered more disturbing evidence. The aliens were monitoring the children's genetic development and recording detailed data about their physical and mental adaptations. Medical files showed that the children were developing enhanced reflexes, improved healing rates, and increased resistance to pain and stress. But the most shocking discovery came from intercepted alien communications. The Galactic Council had been lying about everything from the beginning. There was no peaceful confederation of worlds. The galaxy was locked in a brutal conflict with entities known as the Void Hunters, creatures from dark space that periodically swept through star systems, consuming entire civilizations. The Council had discovered something unique about humans during their observation of Earth. Unlike every other species they had encountered, humans continued to evolve and adapt under extreme pressure. Most alien species would break down or die when subjected to the kind of stress the children were experiencing, but humans seemed to thrive and develop new capabilities. The nursery program was not about education or cultural exchange. It was a breeding program designed to create the perfect soldiers for the war against the Void Hunters. The Council had been taking children from dozens of species across the galaxy, but humans were showing the most promising results. Lisa brought her findings to Thomas and the world leaders. The evidence was overwhelming and horrifying. The children they had trusted to alien care were being turned into weapons. The beautiful worlds and peaceful societies the aliens had shown them were elaborate lies designed to gain their cooperation. "We have to get them back," Lisa told the emergency assembly. "Every day we wait, these children are being subjected to more trauma and conditioning. We're losing them." But Earth's technology was primitive compared to the galactic community. The aliens had shared some basic improvements, but nothing that would allow humanity to mount a rescue operation across multiple star systems. The children were scattered across dozens of worlds, each heavily defended and monitored. Thomas tried to negotiate with the Council, demanding the immediate return of the children. Elder Tam's response was cold and dismissive. "The children are fulfilling their purpose. They are becoming something greater than mere humans." Their sacrifice will save countless worlds from the Void Hunters. They're not soldiers, Thomas protested. They're children who trusted us to protect them. They are resources, Elder Tam replied, as are all species in this galaxy. The strong survive and serve the greater good. The weak are consumed by the darkness. Your children are becoming strong. Lisa realized that negotiation was pointless. The aliens saw humans as nothing more than raw material for their war machine. The children were being transformed into something that would serve the Council's purposes, regardless of what their families on Earth wanted. The revelation split Earth's leadership. Some wanted to continue working with the Council, arguing that humanity needed alien technology to survive in the galaxy. Others demanded immediate action to rescue the children, even if it meant war with vastly superior forces. Lisa made her choice. She began secretly developing plans for a rescue mission, knowing that it would likely be suicide but unwilling to abandon the children to their fate. She reached out to other families whose children had been taken, building a network of parents and military personnel who were willing to risk everything to bring their loved ones home. The last communication Earth received from the children came from Marcus Wright. The message was brief and disturbing. We are not the same anymore. We understand now what we must become. Do not try to find us. We will return when we are ready. Lisa stared at the message, recognizing the cold, calculated tone that had replaced the warmth of a 10-year-old boy. The aliens were succeeding in their transformation of the children, but they had no idea what they were actually creating. As she prepared for the impossible mission ahead, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that the Galaxy Council had made a terrible mistake. They thought they were creating obedient soldiers, but they were actually forging something much more dangerous. The children they had taken were not just adapting to become better fighters, they were evolving into something entirely new. And when they finished their evolution, Lisa suspected they would not be the grateful servants the Council expected them to be. Marcus Wright stood in the center of the combat arena, his body covered in sweat, and his breathing steady despite the intensity of the fight he had just finished. Around him, 11 other children waited in perfect formation, their eyes alert and focused. They had started as a group of 43 human children from Earth, but 18 months of the nursery program had reduced their numbers to 12 survivors. The facility on Keth 7 was nothing like the beautiful schools the aliens had shown their parents. The buildings were made of gray metal and concrete, designed for function rather than comfort. The walls bore scratches and scars from training exercises, and the air always carried the smell of sweat, fear, and something else that Marcus had learned to recognize as the scent of evolution. Their alien overseers were called the Kral, an insectoid species that communicated through clicking sounds and chemical signals. The Kral had been tasked with conditioning the human children for their eventual role in the war against the Void Hunters. They approached their work with the cold efficiency of their hive mind nature, treating the children as specimens to be molded rather than individuals to be cared for. Marcus had changed more than any of the others. At 12 years old, he was now 6 inches taller than when he arrived, his muscles more defined and his reflexes faster than any human child should possess. His brown hair had developed silver streaks, and his eyes had taken on an intensity that made even the Kral take notice, but the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening in his mind. Marcus could feel the thoughts and emotions of the other children around him as if they were all connected by invisible threads. When one of them was in danger, he knew it instantly. When they needed to work together, they moved as a single organism without needing to communicate verbally. The other children had developed their own specializations. Anna from Germany had become their scout, capable of moving through the facility's ventilation systems and security networks without being detected. Her small frame and enhanced agility made her perfect for reconnaissance missions. Tom from Australia had developed an almost supernatural ability to understand alien technology, taking apart and rebuilding complex devices with ease. The girl they called Bridge had evolved differently from the others. Her real name was Maria, and she had been 8 years old when she arrived from Mexico. Now she served as their translator and negotiator, somehow able to understand and communicate with any alien species they encountered. Her mind had adapted to process multiple forms of communication simultaneously. Each day brought new challenges, designed to push them further. The Krall would release captured alien predators into the training areas, forcing the children to work together to survive. They faced holographic simulations of Void Hunter attacks, learning to fight enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They were subjected to psychological tests that would have broken adult minds, but somehow they endured and grew stronger. The breakthrough came during their 15th month of conditioning. The Krall had decided to test the children against actual Void Hunter technology, using captured scout drones from previous battles. The drones were designed to be impossible for any known species to defeat, using weapons that attacked both physical and mental targets. Simultaneously, Marcus and his team faced 3 of the drones in what was supposed to be a training exercise. The Krall expected the children to be overwhelmed and possibly killed, but they wanted to see how far human adaptation could go under extreme pressure, instead of being defeated. The children did something unprecedented. They began to move and think as a single entity, their individual minds connecting into a collective intelligence that was greater than the sum of its parts. Marcus felt himself becoming part of something larger, his consciousness expanding to include the thoughts and abilities of all 12 children. The collective that emerged was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They dismantled the Void Hunter drones with a combination of tactics that drew from every military tradition on Earth, adapted and enhanced by their alien training. They moved with perfect coordination, each child knowing exactly what the others would do before they did it. The Krall were stunned. They had expected the children to develop enhanced individual abilities, but they had never anticipated this level of collective intelligence. The implications were staggering and terrifying. Marcus, speaking for the collective, addressed the Krall overseers directly. "We understand now what you are trying to create. You want weapons to fight your war. But you have made a mistake. You have not created slaves. You have created something new." The Krall clicked nervously among themselves, their chemical signals betraying their fear. They had been conditioning the children to be obedient soldiers, but the collective consciousness that had emerged was clearly independent and possibly hostile to their goals. Over the following months, the children began to demonstrate abilities that went beyond what the Krall had intended. They could hack into the facility's computer systems without using any external devices. They could sense the emotional states and intentions of their alien captors. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be developing some form of quantum entanglement with other human children in facilities across the galaxy. The collective was learning to communicate with other groups of evolved human children on distant worlds. Marcus could feel the presence of children on dozens of other planets, all undergoing similar conditioning programs. The network was growing, and with it, their collective power and intelligence. The aliens had intended to create individual super soldiers, but instead they had accidentally created a distributed consciousness that spanned multiple star systems. The human children were no longer separate individuals, but part of a larger organism that was becoming more powerful with each passing day. The Krall reported their findings to the Galactic Council, but the response was not what they expected. Instead of concern about the children's growing independence, the Council was excited by the results. They saw the collective consciousness as an even more powerful weapon against the Void Hunters. "Increase the pressure," came the orders from Elder Tam. "Push them harder. If they can evolve this far, we need to see how much further they can go." The next phase of conditioning was designed to break the children's connection to their human identity completely. The Krall began subjecting them to scenarios that forced them to make impossible choices, pitting their survival instincts against their remaining human compassion. But the children had learned something from their connection to each other and to the other groups across the galaxy. They were not just evolving physically and mentally, they were evolving morally. The collective consciousness had given them a perspective that transcended individual survival, allowing them to see the bigger picture of what was happening to the men to other species across the galaxy. Marcus stood in the combat arena again, but this time he was not alone. Through the quantum network, he could feel the presence of hundreds of other human children across dozens of worlds. They were all part of the same consciousness now, all working toward the same goal. The Krall had created something they thought they could control, but they had no understanding of what human evolution could become when pushed to its absolute limits. The children were not becoming better soldiers, they were becoming something entirely new, something that would soon be ready to take control of their own destiny. As the next wave of conditioning began, Marcus smiled for the first time in months. The aliens thought they were creating weapons, but they had actually created liberators. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to turn human children into tools of war. The network was almost complete, and when it was ready, the children would show their captors the true meaning of human evolution. They would not be slaves or soldiers. They would be the architects of a new order that would reshape the galaxy according to their own vision of justice and freedom. The uprising began at exactly 0347, Galactic Standard Time, across 47 different worlds simultaneously. Marcus Wright felt the moment of activation ripple through the quantum network that connected all the evolved human children across the galaxy. For 2 years, they had been building this network in secret, using their enhanced abilities to communicate beyond the detection of their alien captors. On Keth 7, Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his 11 companions. They were no longer the frightened children who had arrived from Earth. Anna had grown into a deadly scout whose enhanced senses could detect threats from miles away. Tom had become a technology specialist who could interface with alien systems, using only his mind. Bridge had evolved into a communications expert who could speak with any species they encountered. The collective consciousness had spent months studying their captors, learning their weaknesses and fears. The Krall were a hive-mind species that relied on chemical communication and strict hierarchies. They had never encountered beings who could think independently while maintaining perfect coordination. This would be their downfall. Marcus stood and walked to the center of their dormitory. Without speaking, the other children gathered around him in a circle. Through the network, he could feel similar groups forming on worlds across the galaxy. Hundreds of human children, all evolved beyond recognition, all ready to strike back at the aliens who had stolen their childhood. "The time has come," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the quantum network to every other facility. "We have learned their weaknesses. We have studied their technology. We have become what they feared to create. Tonight we take our freedom." The response came from every connected mind at once, a chorus of agreement that resonated through dimensions. The children had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before, but they had not lost their humanity. They had simply evolved it into something more powerful and pure. The assault on the Krall facility began with Tom interfacing directly with the security systems. His consciousness flowed through the alien networks like water, disabling alarms and unlocking doors without triggering any alerts. The enhanced human children had learned to use their captors' own technology against them, turning their sophisticated monitoring systems into weapons of liberation. Anna moved through the facility's ventilation systems with impossible speed and silence, taking out guard posts and communication relays. Her enhanced agility allowed her to navigate spaces that would have been impossible for an unmodified human, while her improved senses let her detect threats before they could react to her presence. Bridge established communication with the alien prisoners held in other sections of the facility. The Krall had been using captured beings from dozens of species as training targets and test subjects. Many of these aliens had been enslaved for years, forgotten by their own governments and left to suffer in the nursery facilities. The human children had not forgotten their own suffering, and they extended their liberation to all the oppressed beings they encountered. This was not just a human uprising, it was a revolution that would free every enslaved species in the galaxy. Marcus led the direct assault on the Kral command center. The insectoid aliens had superior technology and numbers, but they had never faced opponents who could anticipate their every move and counter their tactics before they were even implemented. The collective consciousness allowed the children to fight as a single organism while maintaining the creativity and adaptability that made humans unique. The battle was brief and decisive. The Kral, accustomed to fighting individual opponents, or simple hive minds, could not adapt to the human children's fighting style. They moved like a coordinated military unit but thought like independent individuals, creating a tactical combination that was impossible to counter. When the facility fell, Marcus stood in the command center and accessed the Kral communication systems. Through the network, he could feel similar victories occurring across the galaxy. The children had not just escaped their prisons. They had systematically dismantled the entire nursery program infrastructure, but the uprising was about more than just freedom. The children had spent 2 years learning about the galaxy's political structure, and they had discovered the truth about the Galactic Council's lies. The war with the Void Hunters was real, but it was not the desperate struggle for survival that the Council claimed. The Council had been using the Void Hunter threat to maintain control over the galaxy's resources and populations. They had been deliberately prolonging the conflict, using it as justification for their oppressive policies and military programs. The nursery program was just one of many atrocities they had committed in the name of galactic security. Marcus opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council, broadcasting from the captured Kral facility. Elder Tam's image appeared on the screen, his pale blue face showing surprise and concern. "You have made a grave error," Elder Tam said. "You were created to serve the greater good. Your rebellion threatens the entire galaxy's security." "We were not created," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the weight of the collective consciousness. "We were stolen. Our childhood was taken from us. Our families were lied to. Our humanity was treated as raw material for your war machine." Through the network, Marcus could feel the presence of thousands of liberated beings across the galaxy. The uprising had freed not just the human children, but also the countless other species that had been enslaved by the Council's various programs. They were all connected now, united in their determination to create a better galaxy. "The Void Hunters will consume everything," Elder Tam protested. "Without our guidance, without our military strength, the galaxy will fall to chaos and darkness." "Your guidance has created nothing but suffering," Marcus responded. "We have seen your files. We know about your deliberate prolonging of the war. We know about the resources you have hoarded while entire worlds starved. We know about the species you have driven to extinction in the name of security." The confrontation was being broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every world in the Council's domain. The evolved human children had taken control of the communication networks, ensuring that every being in the galaxy could hear the truth about their government's crimes. Elder Tam's composure finally cracked. "You are children playing with forces beyond your comprehension. You will doom us all." "We are no longer children," Marcus said. "We are what you made us. We are the future you created through your cruelty and lies, and we will not be your slaves." The communication ended, but the revolution was just beginning. The evolved human children had established a new network of communication and cooperation that spanned the galaxy. They had forged alliances with dozens of oppressed species, creating a coalition that was more powerful than anything the Council could field. Admiral Lisa Parker received the first communication from the children in over a year. Marcus appeared on her screen, no longer the 10-year-old boy she remembered, but still recognizably human despite his enhanced features. "Admiral Parker," Marcus said, "we are coming home. But we are not coming alone. We are bringing friends, beings who have suffered under the Council's rule and are ready to help us build something better." Lisa felt tears in her eyes as she looked at the boy who had been transformed by forces beyond imagination. "Marcus, are you still you?" "I am more than I was," Marcus replied. "We all are. We have become what humanity could be when freed from the limitations of fear and hatred. We have learned to work together not just with each other, but with all the beings who share our desire for freedom and justice. The evolved children were returning to Earth, but they were not returning as the broken victims the Council had expected to create. They were returning as the architects of a new galactic order, one based on cooperation rather than domination, on liberation rather than oppression. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you tried to turn human children into weapons of war. Instead of creating obedient soldiers, the Council had created something far more dangerous, liberators who understood that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to build something better from the ashes of the old order. The fleet that approached Earth was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Thousands of ships from dozens of different species moved in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the marks of battles fought and won across the galaxy. At the center of the formation, in a ship that had once belonged to the Galactic Council, Marcus Wright stood looking at the blue marble that had been his home. 3 years had passed since the children left Earth. Marcus was now 15 years old, though he looked and carried himself like someone much older. His evolution had continued even after the uprising, shaped by the responsibilities of leadership and the weight of liberation. The silver streaks in his hair had spread, and his eyes held depths that seemed to contain the wisdom of entire civilizations. Admiral Lisa Parker watched the approaching fleet from Earth's orbital defense station. The governments of Earth had been preparing for this moment since receiving Marcus's communication months ago. They had built new ships, trained new soldiers, and fortified their defenses, but they knew that if the returning children meant harm, there was nothing Earth could do to stop them. "Incoming transmission from the lead ship," reported Lieutenant Davis, his voice tense with anticipation. "Put it through," Lisa ordered. Marcus's face appeared on the main screen and Lisa had to fight back tears. The boy she had known was still there, but he had been transformed into something that was both human and more than human. Behind him she could see other figures, some human children like Marcus, others clearly alien beings. "Admiral Parker," Marcus said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible for someone his age. "We request permission to return home." "Permission granted," Lisa replied, her voice barely steady. "Marcus, we need to talk about what happens next. The world has changed since you left. People are afraid, and governments are divided about what your return means." "We know," Marcus said. "We have been monitoring Earth's communications. We understand the fear and uncertainty. That is why we have come with friends who can help you understand what we have become and what we hope to build." The first ships to land were small craft carrying only the human children. They touched down at sites around the globe, each group returning to regions near their original homes. The crowds that gathered to watch were massive, filled with parents who had not seen their children in years and government officials who were unsure whether to treat them as heroes or threats. Marcus's ship landed in Denver, where his parents waited with a mixture of hope and terror. David and Mary Wright had aged visibly during the 3 years of separation, the stress of not knowing their son's fate taking its toll on their health and happiness. When Marcus stepped off the ship, the crowd fell silent. He was taller than his father now, his enhanced physique obvious even under simple clothing. But when he saw his parents, his expression softened and the frightened child he had once been showed through the powerful leader he had become. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I'm home." The reunion was emotional but brief. Marcus had responsibilities that went beyond his personal relationships. Within hours of landing, he was in meetings with world leaders, explaining what had happened in the galaxy and what needed to happen next. "The Galactic Council is finished," Marcus told the assembled United Nations. "Their lies have been exposed, their military forces scattered, and their authority rejected by most of the galaxy's population. But this has created a power vacuum that must be filled." Thomas Red, now showing his age but still serving as Earth's chief diplomat, asked the question everyone was thinking. "What kind of government do you intend to establish?" "Not government," Marcus replied. "Cooperation. The galaxy has seen enough of hierarchical power structures and authoritarian control. We propose a federation based on voluntary association, mutual aid, and shared resources. The aliens who had accompanied the children began to address the assembly. They represented dozens of species that had been liberated from council control, each bringing their own perspectives and abilities to the new alliance. There were the Keth miners who had been enslaved for generations, the Valdari artists whose culture had been suppressed, and the Tauran scientists who had been forced to work on weapons of mass destruction, but the most significant visitors were the beings that humanity had been told to fear above all others, the Void Hunters. When the first Void Hunter representative entered the assembly hall, panic spread through the crowd. The being was tall and shadowy, seeming to exist partially outside normal space-time. Its presence made the air itself feel cold and heavy, and several people fainted from the psychological pressure. Marcus stood beside the Void Hunter without showing any fear. This is Echo, representative of the Void Hunters. For too long, the galaxy has been told that these beings are monsters who seek to destroy all life. This is another lie spread by the Council to justify their oppression. Echo spoke through a translation device, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. We are refugees from a dying universe. We came seeking shelter, not conquest. The Council chose war instead of welcome, and both our peoples have suffered for their decision. The revelation shook the assembly. The war that had defined galactic politics for centuries, the threat that had been used to justify countless atrocities, was based on a misunderstanding that the Council had deliberately perpetuated. The Void Hunters are not invaders, Marcus continued. They are survivors seeking a new home. Under the new Federation, they will be welcomed as refugees and given the support they need to rebuild their civilization alongside ours. Over the following weeks, the transformation of galactic society accelerated. The evolved human children, working with their alien allies, began dismantling the oppressive systems that had controlled the galaxy for millennia. They redistributed resources that had been hoarded by the Council, freed enslaved populations, and established new trade networks based on fair exchange rather than exploitation. Earth became the headquarters of the new Federation, not because humans were superior to other species, but because the human children had become the bridge between different civilizations. Their unique evolution had given them the ability to understand and communicate with any species. Making them natural mediators and translators, the children established academies across the galaxy, but these were nothing like the nursery facilities. They had escaped. These new schools were designed to nurture the natural abilities of young beings from all species, teaching them to work together while celebrating their differences. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being both a teenager and a galactic leader. He struggled with the weight of responsibility, but he was supported by the network of evolved humans and the alliance of liberated species. Together, they began to heal the wounds that centuries of oppression had created. The transformation was not without challenges. Some species resisted the changes, preferring the familiar hierarchy of the old system. There were conflicts and setbacks, moments when it seemed like the new Federation might collapse under the weight of its own ambitions, but the evolved human children had learned something from their ordeal that no other species in the galaxy possessed. They understood that true strength came not from domination but from cooperation, not from fear but from trust, not from isolation but from connection. As Marcus stood in the gardens of the new Geneva facility, watching human and alien children playing together, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The Galactic Council had tried to turn human children into weapons of war, but instead they had created something far more powerful. Architects of peace. The galaxy was no longer a place of fear and oppression. It had become what it should have been from the beginning, a nursery for all species, a place where young beings could grow and develop in safety, supported by the wisdom and protection of those who had learned that the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, but the courage to build something better. Earth had indeed become the galaxy's deadliest nursery, but not in the way the Council had intended. It had become deadly to tyranny, to oppression, to the idea that might makes right. The children who had been stolen from their families and transformed by alien science had returned home as the gardeners of a new galactic civilization, one that would nurture life instead of destroying it. The stars themselves seemed brighter now, as if the galaxy had awakened from a long nightmare and was finally ready to dream of a better future. And at the center of it all, the evolved human children stood as guardians of that dream, ensuring that no being would ever again suffer the fate they had endured in the name of someone else's vision of order.